India is among the top 2 markets for DHL Express. That's the word coming in from the CEO of the global logistics company, John Pearson. Speaking to me, Pearson said that the firm was betting on double-digit revenue growth in India. Here's a slice of that conversation.
India is featuring more heavily in the boardroom discussions of companies all over the world. That's point number one. India is becoming more attractive as a manufacturing base. In fact, of that inward investment I referred to, much will be supplying the manufacturing capacity, clean energy, environmental businesses, automotive. We spoke earlier about the automotive industry there, their capacity to export.
How do the investments which are coming into India compare to China, Vietnam and Indonesia?
Well, I think the thing is not the absolute comparison, but the extent to which it's progressing in the right direction. I think to make comparisons between China, Vietnam, Indonesia and India isn't necessarily that helpful, but what I can say is that the progression and the way that India is advancing is extremely fast-paced, and to me says that it's a very competitive partner to any of those other decisions. As companies are looking to diversify, in this much hackneyed phrase of China plus one, which is a compliment to China in many ways, because some of those companies that are looking to diversify are Chinese companies moving out of China, but it's also foreign multinational organizations that are looking to diversify their supplier base. So not decoupling, but de-risking.
How important is India market to DHL Express's growth story for the future? How much of your growth is coming from India, and how do you expect it to contribute to your growth plans across the world in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So as I said, it's the 5th largest economy in the world, and if you take the DHL Express ranking of countries, it's not too dissimilar to that. Whether you take revenue or EBIT is not too dissimilar to how it sits in the ranking of the size of global economies. It's growth is fast-paced, so the GDP figures, as all of your listeners will know, are at the top end of anything being published at the minute. The sentiment towards the country is extremely positive. The way it's attracting inward investment, as I spoke about, is very healthy, and that drives activity in DHL Express. When people are busy selling, buying, repairing, trading, then so too is the DHL Group or DHL Express busy. So it's extremely important. The growth in India is in the top 1 or 2 in the network right now. And being one of our largest countries in the network, that answers the question as to how important a driver it is. So
right.
Yeah, I'm extremely bullish on India. I have been in the past. I've been coming here for the best part of 18 or 20 years. I've done 9 or 10 business reviews with the team, and every time I visit, the company is in better shape than it was before in terms of the ability to service our customers.
So you're saying that you're seeing steady double-digit growth, and India would be among the 2 fastest growing
top 3 or 4 countries in our network, yeah.
Right. Now, in terms of future...
In terms of growth, yeah, the top 1 or 2 even.
Right. Now, in terms of future investments that you would like to make in the India market or immediate expansion plans, would you have any that you can share with us?
I'd rather talk more broadly. As I say, we just opened a facility yesterday. We opened Bangalore. In Mumbai, I was opening a facility, I think, a year ago at the same time. So I think if you look at our map of India, it's either full of gateways, service centers, or aviation assets. If you put aside courier vans and IT investments, gateways, service centers and aviation. And in a country the size of India, a facility might last 10 or 15 years. So if there were 100 facilities, you'd need to be renewing 10% of them every year. So we're continually investing in those service centers. In terms of the gateways, we've got 4 main gateways in India, so that's less frequent, but they're bigger facilities. And then our aviation assets into and out of India continue to be reconfigured because those aviation assets are globally owned, so to speak, but they're reconfigured to make sure we're servicing the Indian business community with the best possible inbound and outbound transit times. So we'll continue to invest in India by the sheer nature of how many facilities we have here. And then when you run that growth through those facilities, Sort of 10% of them are being upgraded every year in one way or another.
Right. Now, you're saying you will continue investing in India. It may be difficult for you to give us exact numbers on the investment plans, but if I were to ask you about where is India in the priority list in terms of the top 5 geographies which you are earmarking investments for the next 5 years. So could you give us a sense of the investment plans for India in the order of importance?
Yeah. So let me answer that this way. Our supply chain division invested 500 million euros in India about 2 years ago. There was quite a fanfare about that and the infrastructure that they were participating with. So that's a significant group investment. So I think it comes in, it ebbs and flows and it comes in cycles, but, it's very high on the list. And the supply chain investment that we spoke about, forwarding is typically a lower asset-based business. We are more like supply chain in the need for facilities and infrastructure. So it'll get all the investment dollars. I think the best way of answering that is to say it'll get all the investment dollars that it deserves. And we have quite a complex process to ascertain and establish each year which facilities we can maybe sweat the assets and get another year or two out of, and where we get our best return, and for the safety of our people commonly. And we are a great place to work, and you can't be a great place to work unless you're a safe place to work. So quite often safety and occupational health and safety will drive the need for an investment. But if India carries on growing at that sort of 20% that it is now, you can just do the math on the inbound and outbound flows, and it'll continue to get it's the lion's share of our investment.
Right. Now, coming back to the connectedness report, and when you speak about countries looking to set up manufacturing or expand manufacturing, which are some of the areas where you are seeing the highest amount of activity, and where you expect the highest amount of activity in 2024?
Well, Asia is often been touted as the growth engine for the world. As that great sort of manufacturing in Asia and consumption in the West metaphor is still alive and well, and thereby some of the fastest growing countries, and in fact we reported this, the last study released in Dubai, that some of the fastest growing economies are indeed in Asia, and as I've just said, the case of India. I think, in terms of perhaps who is getting the benefit of sort of China plus one, if you want to use that phrase, Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, India, Mexico, Turkey, not only countries in Asia are getting some of that. It's a natural diversification of global multinationals and Chinese companies. So I think that there's a beneficiary of 4 or 5 countries, of which India is firmly one. And as India's competitiveness and as its national logistics policy and as the framework for operating in India and business benefits and tariffs and taxes, all things sort of that amalgam of things that put India higher up the list than it was, it'll continue to attract the investment in a competitive way to all the others. And we're quite early days really in terms of this diversification.
So what kind of reforms would be needed if you're talking about 4 or 5 geographies which are benefiting from the China plus one diversification strategy? If India were to move higher in the list, what kind of reforms or government intervention would be needed?
I would say, tariffs play a part, taxes play a part, the way in which, the ease with which foreign companies can set up here, and then increasingly to what we're talking about today, the competitiveness of the logistics infrastructure. So the ability to bring in and ship out competitively or ship within India needs to be competitive as anywhere else. So I think on a high level, any policy, local policy decisions, need to attend to those matters, and the government in India is doing a fine job of recognizing what needs to change and putting in the policy to do so.
When it comes to US decoupling from China, because this is a vision that President Biden had worked with, to what extent has that happened, or is it not happening at all?
I think what people forget with US and China is the extent to which it was coupled. extraordinarily high levels of coupling and trade between those two markets. It's actually dropped, I think, about a quarter since 2016. So in the last 8 years, it's dropped a quarter. What level is it at now? It's at the same level as most other markets. So it is an extremely connected trade lane, and it's really where it came from that was extraordinarily high. Absolutely, it's dropped, but I think that's in line with some of the tariff situations that were put up in the prior administration before Biden, but they are still each other's largest trading partner.
Right. Now, in terms of China's position in the world, over the next 10 years, do you expect, looking at the kind of investment flows around the world, do you expect China's position in globalization, in global supply chains to drop significantly, or you expect it to not change or increase?
I think that's difficult to say. I think you can't underestimate the innovation and the effectiveness and the way in which China can operate on a manufacturing basis. You also have to recognize that supply chains have been built on efficiency and economics, and that's why, as some of these world events, the Icelandic ash cloud crisis, which people now remember as a simple weather event, but if I was to remind your audience that this was a month when no planes were flying above Europe, if we take the pandemic and we take the global financial crisis, the extent to which people's supply chains have changed is extremely minimal. In fact, the only nearshoring that is really taking place is in northern Mexico with the US. And that's a rather positive scenario in my sense. So people have finessed their supply chains. They've moved some very high value and highly critical componentry maybe closer to consumption, but by and large, the supply chains are operating in quite a similar way. And that answers your question that, yes, there will be some diversification from China, but if you take the amount of diversification as a portion or a comparative to the extent to which China is producing for the world, I think things will move more slowly than people imagine, and I think it may well be a decade before you really notice anything in that sense.
All right, so any major fundamental shift in global supply chains away from China would be seen possibly only after 10 years or a decade or so. That's all we have time for. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.